Throughout history, planets undergo phases of prosperous growth and diversification, followed by intense periods of disaster. Here on Earth, there were 5 massive extinction-level events that wiped out anywhere from 70% to over 90% of life. Even now, nearly 150 species go extinct every day. And the same goes for the Star Wars galaxy. Countless worlds pulse with life, with civilizations rising and flourishing, while some of them fade into galactic history. And today, we're going over them all. This is every single extinct and endangered Star Wars species explained. Endangered species. Before we dive into the extinct species of Star Wars, there are plenty that are at risk of becoming extinct that just haven't yet. Whether it be attempted genocide, war, or disease, these species have somehow survived the unthinkable. Geonosians, the architects of the galaxy's most massive hive structures and secret holders of the galaxy's deadliest weapon, the Death Star, the Geonosians were once one of the most populous sentient beings in the galaxy. Known for their hive societies and brutal arena entertainment, they played a pivotal role during the Clone Wars as a manufacturing force for the Separatist battle droids. However, following their involvement in the construction of the Death Star, the Empire wiped out almost the entire species to keep its secrets safe. Only one survivor remains, in the possession of a queen egg and the chance to bring their species back from the brink of extinction. Night Sisters. The witches of Dathomir, widely known for their commandment of dark magics, lived in isolation on their home planet. Their mysticism, however, made them a threat to Count Dooku during the Clone Wars, and thus the Count sent his executioner, General Grievous, to eliminate the Night Sisters. Under Dooku's command, Grievous nearly slaughtered all of them during the Clone Wars, though a handful survived, scattered among the galaxy working as bounty hunters, assassins, or others of the like. Lasat. Tall, powerful, and incredibly strong, the Lasat species of Lasan were nearly destroyed by the Empire on their home world after being branded insurgents and rebels. Their species were destroyed using deadly weapons, the Empire's T-7 ion disruptors. However, some survived the purge of their homeworld, scattering among the stars and rebuilding on their new planet of Lyrasan. Gree. One of the oldest known spacefaring civilizations, the Gree were technological geniuses who mastered interstellar travel millennia before the Republic existed. Over time, however, the Republic waned and their population showed constant decline. By the time of the Phantom Menace, they were an isolated and dwindling species with few ever encountering a Gree. It's thanks to the fascination with this species and their history that Clone Commander Gree chose his name. Itholians. Itholians are a tall humanoid species with little known about them. They were a branch, one of 25 species collectively called Nesses. Their civilization was crushed during the Mandalorian Wars, and any survivors were exterminated. The species now teeters on the edge of extinction, with a few wandering hopeless Outer Rim worlds like Tatooine wandering the streets of Mos Eisley. Kaleesh. The Kaleesh are a little-known species, but most widely recognized by one of their greatest warriors, who would become the feared General Grievous. A reptilian species from the planet Kali, the Kaleesh suffered poverty and oppression due to a conflict with a species called the Yamrai, or Huk, whom they waged war with for ages. At the height of their conflict, the Huk sought the aid of the Galactic Republic, which intervened and censured the Kaleesh, causing hundreds of thousands to die of starvation. Kamasi. The Kamasi were some of the most peace-loving and enigmatic beings in the entire galaxy, with a very rigid society and culture centered around monogamy. Their homeworld Kamas was destroyed, the surface of their planet bombed and devastated by Imperials. The species was devastated, fleeing to Alderaan and other sympathetic worlds, becoming locked in great debate about next steps to help regrow their population. Bomar monks. These beings were more of a physical philosophy rather than a species. The Bomar monks believed in freeing the mind from the distractions of the body. eventually evolving, or rather devolving, into disembodied brains kept in spider-like walkers. The monks had monasteries constructed across the galaxy, most of which were taken over by smugglers or pirates, and the monks forced from their monasteries. Even Jabba's palace is a Bomar monk monastery, though he allowed the monks to continue roaming its halls. Extinct species. The remaining species which compose the vast majority of our list are those that unfortunately no longer exist in the galaxy. While some endangered species have somehow clung to survival, others have already crossed the threshold into history and no longer walk the stars. Rakata. The Rakata were one of the first species to discover hyperspace travel, building an infinite empire through technology imbued with the dark side of the Force. This species was brutal and arrogant, enslaving hundreds of species during their reign. However, their reign ended as quickly as it began. The Rakata were plagued by civil war from their enslaved species, a vast disease outbreak, and the loss of their force sensitivity. The Rakatan species faded, with their great machines lying in ruin across the galaxy. Zephonian. Zephonians were a force-sensitive species that once dominated an incredibly large region of space before vanishing from the galaxy entirely. Little is truly known about their culture, with only ruins, tombs, and technological remnants surviving and hinting at the past glory of their once great civilization. Andon host. Hailing from the planet Malenko, the Andon host were a species that, regrettably, not much is known about. By the time of the Clone Wars, the sentient species of Malenko were long extinct. Caradan. The once proud inhabitants of a now-destroyed planet, Carida, the Caridans were a 2-meter-tall humanoid species with incredibly dense musculature to survive their planet's intense gravity. Coming at the hands of the Galactic Empire, their planet's destruction and their extinction came in an instant. Stau's Sizik species. This species' true name is unknown and is only known through the being named Stuaz Sizzix. This mercenary's world was destroyed by the Galactic Empire, killing the entire species save for one individual. Dizonite. Native to the moon Dizon Frey, the entire species was massacred, their destruction broadcast through the Empire. All that were present on their planet were killed, their choral screams causing severe emotional distress to anyone who listened to them, leading to this audio's use in Imperial torture methods by Dr. Gorst. Elayan. The Elayan were a civilization who lived on the planet Polis Massa. By the end of the Clone Wars, archaeologists and exobiologists believed that the Elayan were the ancestor of the Kaladahan species. To prove this, they excavated Polis Massa to attempt to recover Elayan tissues and use cloning technology to recreate them. Equani. The fall of the Equani is the result of possibly the biggest miscalculation in Star Wars history. 6 months before the Clone Wars began, scientists of the Republic were stationed on the moon of Equanus. They miscalculated the blast of a new superweapon, which hit the sun of their solar system, resulting in a massive solar flare that cooked the planet. Since only a few hundred Equani living off-world survived the destruction of their home planet, there were not enough left to populate a new world, and the species eventually died out. Kanda. With little much known, the only sources available which describe the Kanda people are scarce. Evidently, the Kanda had amassed incredible quantities of wealth and power before wiping themselves completely out of galactic history in a terrible war that took place thousands of years before the rise of the Galactic Empire. Kivin. Native to the planet Kiva, the Kivin were a peaceful species who took up occupations such as artists and architects. Unfortunately, due to an experiment breach, life of Kiva was entirely wiped out, and the native Kivin were transformed into wraiths, appearing as shadows with red eyes. Eventually, the species vanished without a trace, leaving the species to become extinct. Lodi. Native to Solibus 4, the Lodi unfortunately went extinct a millennia before the beginning of the Clone Wars, their secrets being kept in a supposed secret prism. Maron. a sentient species native to the planet Marani. The Maran had 4-fingered hands, sharp-tufted ears, and a coat of fur. The Maran were entirely eliminated by the Confederacy of Independent Systems during the Clone Wars. Rethel, rumored to have existed on an unknown planet in the Mid-Rim, the only thing known of this civilization is rumor. They allegedly built a city on their planet which emanated a sensor disruption field known as Rethel Point, where the name of their species comes from. Solarian. Entirely wiped out in a war a millennia before the Battle of Yavin, all that remains of the Solarian people are ruined outpost worlds completely untouched by the wider galaxy. Their homeworld, Sol 5, was discovered by an Imperial party followed by Han Solo and Chewbacca. According to Han, the species was wiped out by a plague. Trawaki, a small cave-dwelling sentient species native to Rushan 9, this species evolved on its world independently of all other life. It is unknown how the Trawaki died off, but it is confirmed that the Trawaki are all extinct. Bancora. In a galaxy full of planet-destroying weapons and galactic plagues, the homeworld of the Bancora species suffered a completely different cataclysm. At some point around 1300 BBY, their homeworld suffered a collision with a meteor, leading the Republic to give them a small sanctuary on Coruscant. After the rise of the Galactic Empire, though, this sanctuary was seized, and the Bancorans were relocated to Perau 6, where, after 19 years, the species went extinct. Masasi. A species living on Yavin 4, they built enormous stone temples thousands of years before the Imperial era. It was believed that the Masasi were a slave race of the Sith species who had brought them to the moon. The Masasi themselves went extinct millennia before the Battle of Yavin, sometime after finishing their temples. These temples are the same ones we see the Rebel Alliance inhabiting on Yavin during A New Hope. Tong. The original species of the Mandalorian culture, the Tong were a warlike people driven from their homeworld of Coruscant. After centuries of conquest and war across the galaxy after their expulsion, the species had gone extinct. On their conquest, they absorbed other species into their cause, which then took on the more familiar name of Mandalorians, carrying the warrior traditions of the Tong with them. Zell. This species was believed to be the precursor to humans in the galaxy. The Zell were the other sentient species originating on Coruscant alongside the Tong. The Zell suffered a near-extinction level event after a massive volcanic eruption shattered their numbers during the conflict with the Tong. After some time, the Zell recovered, driving the Tong off-world and continuing to inhabit Coruscant until their eventual development into humans, leaving the precursor species to extinction. Drayden. Peaceful sentience native to the Dreda system in the Outer Rim, this species was known to help Jedi fugitives of the Empire find shelter on their home world during the time of the Galactic Empire. After discovering that the Draydens were doing this, the Empire retaliated with genocide. Gargantules. The Gargantules of the planet Boz Pity were a massive species of 6-armed giants. Their height topped 20 meters or 65 feet with human-like facial features. Over the span of a decade at war with the Hutts, the Boz Pity giants were entirely eliminated by droids, their remains scattered over the planet's surface. Gerb. Native to Yavin 13, Gerb were a legomorph species meaning hair-shaped. Basically, these species were sentient space rabbits. Unfortunately, the Gerb fell victim to the Yuuzhan Vong when they invaded the Yavin system, where the planets Yavin 8 and Yavin 13 were entirely cleansed of life. Slith. Another sentient species native to the moon Yavin 13, the serpentine slith lived in tribes up to 15 members large. Interestingly, the slith communicated using a language consisting of the sounds made by rubbing their scales on the ground. The slith met the same end as the other sentient species on Yavin 13 when their planet was wiped entirely of life by the Yuuzhan Vong. Akari. A near-human species native to the planet Vestar, the Akari were entirely eliminated by the Empire during the so-called Akari Campaign. Using a biological weapon after months of fighting, the Empire's Lightning Battalion decimated the entire race, leaving only one survivor who later died at the hands of Darth Vader. Iocath. The Iocath species were a group of sentients originating from the unknown regions, their most recognizable feat in the galaxy being the construction of the Iocath sphere. This species society was composed of scientists and engineers who designed weapons of mass destruction. Over their history, these weapons were tested on over 70 unique worlds, destroying entire civilizations. These weapons ended up being their downfall, however. As years passed by, resentment began to form within the Iocath species, and a civil war erupted. Since both sides had access to weapons of such destructive capabilities, you can guess how they went extinct from there. Kamamga. A society once inhabiting the jungles, yes, you hear right, the jungles of Tatooine, the Kamamga were Tatooine's original sentients. While the Kamamga may be extinct, the species they gave rise to, the Tuskens and the Jawas, still live on. Kwa. Native to the planet Dathomir, the Kwa built both the Infinity Gates and Star Temples of their species before the Republic formed. These were structures which allowed for instant travel between interstellar locations, enabling the Kwa to travel across the entire galaxy. The Kwa existed at the time of the Rakata, who desired the Infinity Gates themselves, leading to a war between the two races. Once the protégés of the Kwa, the Rakata, fought their former benefactors back to their home world, those that were left on Dathomir were hunted by the Night Sisters, and the species split into different factions before eventually going extinct. Nightmare demons. Entities so strange and alien they nearly defy categorization, nightmare demons were a species from the planet Droxine, and took the form of small primates with two tails, suction-cupped fingers, and a bare head. These beings had strong telepathic abilities, allowing them to drive other sentients and non-sentients insane with hallucinations. Initially thought to be extinct by the time of the Clone Wars, some demons survived, and one was even killed by Luke Skywalker. Unfortunately, the species fell below their recoverable population capacity and is doomed to extinction. Shada Biboran. The Shada Biboran were a small species of green-skinned humanoids indigenous to the planet sharing their name. Unfortunately, their system star began to die, which deprived them of radiation, without which they could not survive. All efforts to relocate the species failed, and the last of them went extinct in 38 BBY. Sharu. This species offers an interesting case never seen before in the galaxy of a species going completely extinct, then re-emerging. The Sharu were a highly advanced humanoid species with some of the highest intelligence recorded in the galaxy. Circa 100,000 BBY, the Sharu were threatened by a powerful entity, so, to protect themselves, the Sharu hid their cities underground beneath plastic pyramids. They used crystalline life orchards to temporarily drain their intelligence, devolving their civilization into the primitive Toka, effectively causing the Sharu to go extinct. Prior to this, though, the Sharu created something called the Mind Harp, which, when activated, would alert the Toka that it was safe to re-emerge. The Mind Harp was discovered by none other than one Lando Calrissian and activated, thus bringing the Sharu back from the grave. Starfish-shaped precursor race to the Sharu. Before the aforementioned Sharu, it is believed that a precursor race inhabited their home planet. The only source of this precursor species mentions them as starfish-shaped. Silentium creators. An extragalactic species of sentient, star-shaped organics, quite possibly the ones we just mentioned. This species is exclusively known to have created a sentient droid species known as the Silentium. Thus, this extinct species were known as the Silentium creators. Their homeworld and history were lost, with their creators being the only thing to remember them by. This species was known to have been eliminated by a radiation storm, despite their droid creations living on. Telfraean. Native to the planet Telfray, the Telfrayans were a sentient green-skinned humanoid species. It was thanks to their unrelenting pride in their civilization that they rebelled against the Galactic Empire, which subsequently resorted to, as with the theme of this video, eliminating all life on the planet, rendering it completely uninhabitable for years. Journey. The initial sentient species on the planet Jern, the Journey ruled a massive empire before going extinct far before the Galactic Civil War took place. All that remains of this species are scattered ruins on distant worlds. Yalarons. A primitive sentient species native to the planet Yalara, despite being a primitive species, they constructed a cloaking device to shield their planet from the outer galaxy. Regrettably, they were discovered by a group of Nogri whom Darth Vader ordered to execute the Yalarons. Burrow. A species native to the planet Kesa, the Burrow had no presence off their home world. That said, outer galactic travel found its way to Kesa instead, and some visitors aboard a geological survey starship destroyed a forest on the planet. The destruction of this habitat led to a devastating chain reaction, which caused the extinction of the Burrow species. Arisi. Indigenous to the planet Arisis, the Arisi were a species heavily involved in the slave trade of the galaxy, engaging in slave raids throughout their home sector. Unfortunately for them, the Arisi picked on the wrong group to raid. After harassing the Argozdans, a species in the same sector, it forced the latter species to join the Galactic Republic. In short order, the Argozdans devastated Arisis, exterminating all life on the planet, including all of the Arisi slavers. Morillon. Initially from the planet Morillon, this species of the same name was unfortunate enough to have evolved on a planet within Hutt space. They were enslaved by the Hutts, but ended up freeing themselves. Unfortunately, the Hutts ended up reconquering the planet, driving the Morillon to extinction. Tangrene. The Tangrene were a sentient species from a planet also called Tangrene. Under the rule of the Galactic Empire, the Tangrene were enslaved and forced to construct an Imperial Intelligence Ubictorate, after which the local Imperial Moff ordered their genocide, leading to the extinction of the species. Fear. The Fear was a sentient species endemic to the world of Furi. Considered master shipbuilders, the average member of this species was tall, with ivory-colored skin, and had 6 fingers on each hand. Unfortunately, their skills in shipbuilding couldn't help them escape a planet-wide plague that struck their home world, which ultimately caused their extinction. Gobindi. The Gobindi were a species native to a planet also called Gobindi. Members of this species were considered master architects, responsible for the construction of massive ziggurats found in the deep jungles of their home planet. And just like our last master builder species, the Gobindi were completely wiped out by a virus that covered the entire planet. Despite finding an antidote to the virus, the damage was done, and the species went extinct. Kakaibak. A sentient species from the planet Marti 5, the Kakaibak were responsible for creating the hyperspace nullifier weapon. Just like every other super weapon creating species we've talked about on this list, they eventually became extinct, although the reason is unknown. Porporites. Hailing from the Porpor system, the Porporites were a cetacean species that made contact with the Galactic Republic shortly after the Great Hyperspace War. Unique to this list, the Porporites became addicted to a recently discovered spice, which put them into a homicidal frenzy, prompting them to attack other worlds. The Porporites succumbed to their addiction and were exterminated by the Ganks in the year 4800 BBY. Molagarians. Native to the planet Molagar, the sentient Molagarians were a highly advanced people who decided that the best thing to do to their planet was turn it into a giant reactor. To nobody's surprise, this plan backfired, quickly decimating the entire species. Mermen. Once a sentient species from the planet Moncala, the mermen were effectively Star Wars mermaids. It is unknown why this species had gone extinct, but it is confirmed that they are long gone from the galaxy. Palmians, officially called the Palmians du Tigre, this sentient species was indigenous to the planet Palme du Tigre. This humanoid species was not yet a spacefaring civilization, and unfortunately they were entirely wiped out as the last test of a stormtrooper training program. Renvarites. Indigenous to the planet Renvar, the Renvarites were the architects of massive cathedrals on their home world. It's a shame they didn't add heating to those cathedrals because the entire species ended up going extinct when their home world entered an ice age. Zayaks. Native to the planet somewhere in the unknown regions of the galaxy, the Zayaks were yet another technologically advanced species who created a vast array of incredible devices. Even said to have created an entire world themselves, the Zayaks eventually went extinct, though the reason is entirely unknown. Yorgrax. The native species of the planet Yorgrax, these sentients developed their civilization prior to 1,000 years before the events of the Battle of Yavin. When a Sith Lord arrived on the planet, he used the Yorgrax as a slave species to build his fortress, which eventually caused their extinction. Home Minox. Yes, somehow Minox, the species best known for their small part in draining the power of the Millennium Falcon when inside of an Exogorth, had evolved sentience. Though this evolution was not natural. These creatures were endemic to a single asteroid, which was imbued with the dark side of the Force. They referred to this asteroid as the Home. Unlike regular Minox, Home Minox had triangular yellow eyes and hands on their wings. Eventually, the species went extinct as they could not exist outside of their home asteroid and exhausted its resources. Zim the Despo was a tyrannical warlord who lived far before the time of the Galactic Empire. During his life, he led dozens of conquests across the galaxy, even against the Hutts before they became a great crime syndicate. As he attacked the galaxy, he purged it of several species along the way, including the Irmi, Easy, Klee, Oronanon, Cattle, Sooth Sisters of Pelgrin, Visa, and Zuamon. During old Mandalorian conquests, several species had their cultures destroyed, with their species either being exterminated or absorbed into Mandalorian war history, including the Fenelar, Nevuda, and Tulunians. Unfortunately, some species are so obscure that the only thing we know about them are their names, but it is confirmed that these are extinct. These include the Patho, Pelgrin, Thrella, Tispori, and Wasilsi. An even deeper level of unknown are the species that have left scars, marks, and monuments on distant planets including Asmiru, Dead Red Moon, Jandoon, Geosin, Kilpar, Forne, Hijarna, Jangwine, Jerilek, Jolmark, Neona, Shola, Shun, Usk, Volgax, and Serapher. Despite this being an incredibly long list, it's more than likely that every world that contains life in the Star Wars universe has undergone at least one extinction-level event, or has had more than one sentient species go extinct that could not be listed. But for now, that does it for every known endangered and extinct species in Star Wars. Which was your favorite? Were there any that you think should be added to the lists? Let us know in the comments.